Thanks everybody. I'm going to be using the Zoom chat. We're going to try to make this as interactive as possible, as interactive as Zoom and all of this could be. But my name is Vivek Betty, and today we're going to talk about road mapping. A little bit more about me, and thanks for the quick intro, Anjali. I've been in product for geez about 18 plus years now. Started my career as an engineer, like many of you, right? Like nobody that I know actually goes to school for product management, right? You come in through different disciplines. I was an engineer, double major in computer science, computer engineering from Rutgers University. If there's anyone from Rutgers where I was been there, do a shout out on the Zoom. Spent a lot of time at Goldman Sachs, quickly pivoted to product. And then about 13 years at Goldman, I realized I don't want to work at big companies. I like startups. I had my own startup that eventually got acquired. I worked at a fintech called LearnVest. And 3 months later, they were acquired by Northwestern Mutual. So I couldn't avoid the big companies, but I've seen both sides of it, the startup side of product management and the big company side of product management. And we're going to talk a little bit about that throughout today and the subtle differences. Today, I spend a lot of my time doing workshops. I'm an author. I just published my book. Yay, You, the Product. It's available on Amazon, and it really kind of puts you at the center of product management. And it's all about kind of the softer skills of product management, right? Relationship building, storytelling, and all that good stuff. Cool. So that's me. Let's get right into it. And please, thank you for saying congrats on the new book. Please let's be interactive and please don't be shy and comment on the Zoom. Roadmaps. Okay, I'm gonna ask a question in the Zoom. If I say the word roadmap, what's like the first word that comes to your mind? What do you think of a roadmap? What do others think of a roadmap? The word itself at many times can be confusing, right? So just pop it into Zoom, but what do you think when I say the word roadmap? Like what immediately comes to your mind? Immediately. Director of product, direction of product, journey, milestones, time delivery, goal, planning, plan, timeline, strategy. There you go. We already have end results. We already have so many varying definitions, right? We went from strategy to timeline to visual representation to features. And this is my point, right? The word itself can be very confusing. And if you're in product, it's already confusing. But then when you start engaging with marketing, operations, your founder, it gets even more confusing because everyone just has a different opinion of it, right? So what I first like to do is roadmap. What the heck is it? By definition, it's a plan or a guide, right, that shows something on how it's arranged and how it can be accomplished. And it's not just a product term, by the way. That's what's misleading, right? It's a plan. It's a guide to get you on how things will be arranged to go accomplish something, right? Even if I wanted to go climb a mountain, I need a roadmap and a plan on how I'm going to do it and which route I'm going to take, right? So it's important to kind of think that through and remember that in your head. First lesson we're going to talk about, define the roadmap in the organization. I'll share a quick story with you. I was at my last company and I was working with the CEO of a Fortune 100 company, right? And a lot of his time was, I would spend every Monday morning with the team for about 3 hours with him, right? And about 6 months later, I asked him a simple question. I'm like, do you know what a roadmap and product management is? Which was a bold move, right? He's like, yeah, it's a blueprint and a vision. And we're like, okay. And then when I talked to my engineering team, they said, no, it's milestones and release cycles and sprint cycles, right? So I immediately found out that, roadmaps need to be defined. Your job as the product manager is to make sure everyone's speaking the same language. It's our goal, right? To make sure everyone understands what a roadmap is. And it doesn't really matter if you want it to be a blueprint or you want it to be a feature release cycle. And by the way, what I've realized the best way to do it is have different versions of your roadmap. You might have a roadmap that's a story, and then you have, 2-week sprints or quarterly sprints for your tech and engineering team, but then you have a little bit more of a quarterly view for executives and stakeholders. But it's important to come up with what that language means. And it's our job as product managers to set this stage, right? Whether you're a founder at a small company or a product manager, it's our job to let everyone know what that roadmap is. I shared that story about my CEO, but and I failed. And I always like to talk about stories where I failed 6 months later, and I didn't have my manager, my boss, who's the CEO of a Fortune 100 company. I never defined what a roadmap is. And when he said it's a blueprint, we're like, no, it's actually not. We've been speaking different languages. It's not a blueprint. For us, it's not a 5-year vision. That is a part of road mapping, but the way we think about it. So we had some open board sessions with him. You're going to find that I love workshops. Workshops are awesome. Okay. I hate boring meetings, and I like to turn everything into a workshop. It's very cheap, guys. Sticky notes and a flip chart, right? Try to convert your meetings into workshops. This is how great roadmaps are built. When you get into, and by the way, inherently, you're also trying to speak the same language with your stakeholders. So we started doing that with our CEO. I'm happy to say after I failed, we quickly pivoted, and he really understood what a roadmap was, and he started talking to us on a weekly basis in that terminology. Here's some tips. Have a very, very clear message on what a roadmap is and what it's not. So this is really important. We get so fixated on the roadmap, but we actually forget to say what it's not, right? If your roadmap is a more of 1 to 2 year strategy, it's not a 5-year thing, right? And those components are something reserved for something else maybe. Preface that your roadmaps are not guaranteed. If anything that COVID has taught me through the global pandemic, nothing in life is guaranteed, right? If you need to set very clear expectations that this is a guide. Just like any guide in life, we want to use we're at A and we want to get to point B, but life happens. Something could happen and derail us. So we want to preface nothing is guaranteed, right? I know this is difficult, guys, and I do a whole other talk on how do you say no to people, but it is important to kind of set that tone from the beginning. I talked about subversions, right? If you can have a roadmap and you can have different versions of it that really resonate to your audience, and remind people the cons of changes. Scope creep is a killer, right? Happy to add in that extra thing you want to put in a roadmap, or here's all the consequences, right? It's our job as founders, product managers to really help kind of define that. So let's do it in the essence of being a little bit more kind of proactive and collaborative here. Let's do a quick exercise. Please comment in the Zoom. Let's imagine that we're in Italy. I love Italy. And we're in Italy and we want to open up our own bike shop, right? A bike app. We're going to develop a bike app for tourists, Bike Bonjour, right? We're developing a new bike renting app, right? It's going to be an app for tourists that come to Italy. It's for standard regular bikes, nothing fancy here, no e-bikes and any of that. And Italian law, I'm making this up, says that you don't require a driver's license. So we're going to build this mobile app for tourists that come into Italy, and it's for regular, good old school bikes, right? You have your CEO, your CMO, your head of ops, growth, team, tech, all the people that you're working with, and you are the product manager. And you set up a meeting to say, we're going to talk about roadmap. And all these people probably have not even heard of the word, or they've heard of it mildly, right? And they don't really know what it means, but it's your job and you set it up. Before we move forward, I want to have a roadmap meeting. Cool? Now, I have some questions for you. What are we going to, first question is what's in a roadmap and what's not? So keeping this context, you have all these different people sitting in that meeting room with you, right? What are some things that you are going to say are a roadmap in this bike mobile app that we're building for e-bikes, right? And start, if you have any thoughts, put them in the Zoom, but it's important. The reason for this exercise is there's no right or wrong answer. More importantly, I want you to kind of get in that train of thought of this is in a roadmap and this is not in a roadmap. So what do you guys think is going to be something in this roadmap? Ideation, love that. Scope, very, very cool. Anything else? Objective. So this is really important. Every good roadmap, you actually have that. It's like a resume, right? When you look at a person's resume, you always have that thing at the top that says, what are you trying to do? Like, what is your objective? Are you trying to become a product manager, et cetera? Why don't we do that on roadmaps? We have to kind of set the tone to say, the point of this roadmap is XYZ, right? Phases. I love these answers. And again, none of these are right or wrong, right? I'm trying to just get us in the mindset of what is deliverables, right? Timelines, cool. Now let's shift focus. This is going to be actually harder, right? What's not in the roadmap? What do you think is like, you're setting the tone, right? And all these things that they're probably going to expect. And by the way, some will be there, some won't. So someone saying cost possibly isn't in roadmap. Budget is probably not in roadmap. Features, interesting. Pricing, okay. So technology. So I think that's a very important one that I always like to zone in on. Great product managers are most important. It's like building houses, right? You can build the best house in the world and it can look beautiful, but in the end of the day, if the plumbing doesn't work, what's the point of the house, right? Product managers end up spending so much time looking outward that they forget that their tech team is their most important stakeholder. Listen, we're not going to be anything without the technology team, right? And I would say at this phase in a roadmap, our job is to defend the technology team. If someone's saying, I want a 3-legged chair, and you know 3-legged chairs cannot be built because all chairs have 4 legs, right? It's our job to defend the technology team. So I actually really like this answer because it's very important to highlight that we are not going to talk about technology this early in the process, right? We need to protect our team. We're not going to do t-shirt sizing or any of that. This is really important to just think that through. I saw some other answers here. Features would be in. Cool. Yes, someone was slow to type there, but I do think features probably make it. I like that idea of cost, right? Because in the end of the day, I don't know if I know. If we're working at Bike Bonjour and we're going to build this mobile app. I can't tell you this early in the process in a roadmap that costs how much things are going to cost, right? So again, that might fall on the this side of the fence. Sorry, just catching up here. Features, right? Cool. So, and there's other ideas too that we can think through here. One of the other things that I would tell you that I would say, make sure you're passionate about: cost, budgets, pricing, technology. We need to defend them. The other thing that's important to point out here, which is important, someone mentioned marketing and sales. And milestones. You can't start making big assumptions that this is not a football game, right? We're not gonna say I'm gonna hit in 2 drives that I'm gonna make it on the 30-yard line, right? We can't make bold predictions here. We still have to do a lot of ideation, scope creep, requirement gathering, right? So it's very important that you are smart about, in this part of the roadmap, not setting too many wishful thinking milestones. Cool? Okay, let's move to the third column because I want to get to some of the more fun stuff after this. If people in that room say, cool, I kind of get it. This is a guide. It's going to have all these things. Here's the things it's not. How do I contribute? How am I going to be the one that contributes to this roadmap? Because the marketing person has idea, the ops persons have ideas. What are good ways that you're going to give them the answer like, great, I want you to contribute, and here's ways you can do that. Shoot out some answers on the Zoom. But these people, Vivek, who are the audience this roadmap is for? This is for your team, right? The audience for this is CMO, Chief Operating Officer, technology team, everybody that you're going to work for. This is the unfortunate catch-22 of a product manager. Your audience is actually everybody, right? You're just kind of making sure that you're thinking it through. Now, you can take this roadmap and make it more specific to a team. But let's come back to that, right? How can people contribute to adding insight, knowledge, opinions into their roadmap? What are some rules that you're going to set up? Tam, what else? Any other ideas? This is getting harder, right? Workshops, okay? I'm going to put Tam, I'm going to put things of that, right? But I think it's important, and there's also different strategies. More important than Tam, we're going to say feedback sessions, right? Are we going to look at data? This is an important point where you can say to your stakeholders, come with data, right? It's awesome when people wave their wand, and founders are so guilty of this. I've been one, right? It would be so cool if my pen changed from blue to black ink. Great, founder, but has anyone actually asked that? Have you done some research, right? So ammo your folks to come back with some data and insight. This is not just wishful thinking, and those are important sessions too, but those are for different times, right? I like the predictions, right? You can come up with some predictions and some ideas. Cool. Let's move on to the next one. There's a lot more that you probably guys can think of this. How do we get updates? Okay, so this is really, really challenging. You build this awesome roadmap. Everyone kind of gets and understands what's in it, what's not. They know how to reach out to you, have workshops, insights, etc. How are you going to keep them up to date, right? Are you going to talk to them once a year? You're talking to your team probably every day in stand-ups. How are you going to let these stakeholders know what's happening, right? Is there a method you're going to use? Is there a technology you're going to use? Okay, so you could update to the development cycle. I, by the way, love that one. I'm going to tell you why I think that's important. You can update via broadcasts. Okay, what I mean by that. That wasn't me. Oh, it was me. My Apple Watch is asking me if she knows some ideas. What I mean by that is don't just send an email, okay? Emails are not the best way to communicate roadmap updates. I love these answers that are coming in. Create a Slack channel, create a constant communication. You guys are kind of getting the feel here, right? You need to have a constant communication channel with these stakeholders. Just sending them an email is not useful. One big thing that I do, I ask every stakeholder team that I have to pinpoint a representative. It could be someone from the marketing team, right? They jump in and they come to our stand-ups. Every 15 minutes, they'll watch how the sausage is made, right? And that really gives them that insight of how things are working. Slack is great. IM is great. Even having them in for like I like no agenda meetings. If you ever try that, have your stakeholders come in, have sticky notes available and say, here's our roadmap. There's no agenda. We just want to let you know what it's like. Really dangerous, but sometimes cool, is have different stakeholders come in together and start spewing off their requirements. And you'll actually see that they appreciate each other's, right? And start seeing how things work in the ops team versus the marketing team. Cool, guys. I think we hit the home run on this. We have some good ideas. Let's move to the second lesson. You have to set some rules. Sorry, I'm trying to answer all these questions. No agenda meetings can be dangerous, but they can be extremely rewarding too, right? What I mean no agenda is you're still the quarterback of the meeting, but you have to set some ground rules, right? Are we gonna talk about mobile apps today? Cool. So now we're zoned into mobile apps and everything else is out of scope. We're gonna talk about, is paying your billing system on mobile apps more important or the user experience, right? The ops team might have an opinion one way, the marketing team might have an opinion one way, and then you start kind of guiding those questions, engaging it and seeing it through. Let's go to lesson 2, paint and sketch. I get this question really often is how far out should my roadmap be, right? Should it be a 2-week roadmap? Should it be a 2-year roadmap? And then how much of it is certain, probable, and hopeful? And I like to use a strategy called now, near, and far, right? Now is painted. It's pretty like colorful, right? As you go further into near, it's a little bit more black and white. And far is not painted yet. We're just sketching it out and thinking it through, right? I failed at this once, I'll be honest with you, right? I decided that I knew how to build a reporting engine because I'm in digital, I know finances, and I thought I knew what everyone would want. So my team and I, we built a reporting engine and we thought it was awesome. It kicked butt, right? It failed. Nobody wanted to use the reporting engine. The reason is we missed the mark. We thought that we knew what people wanted, but we actually had to sit down with the team to understand. There's a real picture actually of them drawing. We made them work, we made them draw, we made them think through the ideas. And what I can't quickly realize is all these things that I thought were awesome, which were really further down the road, they didn't even really need that. They needed a lot of basic stuff, pie charts, graphing, what if scenarios. That was there now, but that was my later, right? And I completely missed the mark because I was thinking through things differently. So some ideas as you have workshops with folks in your room and you think about now, near, and far, clearly get out of stakeholders their priorities. This is really hard, but a lot of times stakeholders can't clearly articulate what their priority is, right? They might want to do 3 or 4 things, but then you have to ask these open-ended questions and ask for that insight to really dissect and get what their priority is, right? Just because someone wants a pie chart to show their finances, great. That's your priority. What do you mean? Do you want the pie chart to be assets versus allocations? Do you want it to be budget-based, right? You have to ask those questions and they might not even realize it, and having that open dialogue helps. I take a piece of paper, I draw 3 columns, now, near, and far, and I force people to force rank things, right? As they start having these discussions, they'll say social and community is awesome. I'm like, but is it now? Do you need it in the next month, right? And then you can actually start getting into this prioritization exercise without saying that scary word to them. And they're starting to force rank things, right? They might say, yeah, this is more important. That can wait a little bit. And you're starting to kind of build some early versions of that roadmap. We talked about this before, get them together with other stakeholders as well. So let's do this. Let's do an exercise. Going back to Bike Bonjour, I have 6 features here, okay? For building this mobile app. Remember, we're building a mobile app for tourists that come visit Italy, and they're gonna just rent bikes, right, to get around town from our app. One, the CMO tells you tourists selecting their native language. For example, if I came from India, if I came from France, the ability for them to select their native language and communicate with the mobile app is really important. Okay, cool. Thanks, CMO. The CEO says non-negotiable. I want the ability to locate your bike. Bike has to have a GPS, so we have to know where the bike is, okay? The UX team says pricing and the types of bikes available are important. Great. Unlock and pay for the bike, right? The finance team really wants us to make sure that we're paying for the bike. Operations, they think it's going to be a nightmare. People are going to start dropping off their bike everywhere, and then we won't be able to figure it out. They want to make sure that we're giving recommendations to where to park your bike when you're done with it and pick it up. And social, the growth team, they're all about growing the community. They want to make sure that we're socially sharing this with other people, right? Now, again, no right or wrong answer, right? But why is this now? So I want you to think through all of those 6 features, and we're going to revisit them in the next exercise. But you're in the room and all these different people are saying, this is the feature that's important to me. You ask, why is it important? What are some types of questions or thoughts you would ask to these people about their features that they're so passionate about that they're non-negotiable, and you're forcing them to put them in now, near, and far, and everyone's like, it's now, it's now. Everyone says their thing is now, right? And you as the product manager are now forced to ask them some questions, right? Because you're only going to be able to pick 1 or 2. You can't do 6 features. What are some of the types of questions you'll ask them to say, why is it now? What happens if we launch without it? Love it. Love that question. So if we didn't do it and launched, what would happen? Okay. What else do you guys have? Is it working on its own? Okay. Is it dependent, I think this person is saying, on something else? What else would you ask? Remember, your job here is that you're only going to be able to do a few. You're going to have to say no to some folks. So it's very important to ask the right questions to really spark, why is this important? I'll give you guys a hint. Insight. Have you talked to anybody? Have you gotten any data? Is this just an opinion, right? Will customers use it? I love that. Have we done any customer validation, right? That's really important as well. If someone can't defend why they want to use it, another really important one is, have we watched customers, right? A lot of times people get really obsessed with a feature and they get married to it. I've been victim of this. Unless you work at Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter, you're probably not using your product every 5 minutes, right? That's the ultimate irony of a product manager. You're building it for somebody else. So it doesn't really matter what you think. It matters what your customer thinks. I was wrong in my scenario. I tried to build a reporting engine for me and it failed. So it's important to also say, CEO or CMO, I know you really want that feature, but have you validated it with other people? Have you also watched, right? Versus data. I gotta be honest with you, many times in my career, data's lied to me. Data's great. I'm not saying that you shouldn't use it, but nothing also, in addition, you should add shadow sessions. We should be interviewing people. We should be watching them use our bikes or use other bikes, right? What else do we got? Competitors, I was just thinking of that and you got it. What are our competitors doing? With competitors, it gets interesting, right? Because I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. You could actually end up doing Lyft and Uber are a great example, right? Lyft just basically did what Uber did and then changed it, right? So you can take the approach of doing something similar that your competitors are doing and double down on it, or you can do the approach of this is missing in the market, right? Competitors are doing A, B, and C, but nobody's doing D. Maybe we start there, right? So those are interesting ideas. Cool. Let's move on to the next one. Oh, I have a typo here. So now what if you decide something is near or far and it's not now, right? How would you defend it, right? Like let's move ahead. It's like a couple weeks later, you come back and you tell some of these stakeholders, sorry, that's going to be later, right? And they're going to be like, but why is it later? I already told you that customers want it. I showed you some insight and it's important, right? What are some ways or strategies that you might use to say that it's later? And it might be later because of what reasons, right? I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking. One of the main reasons for this is, by the way, tech, right? It might be hard to do from a technology standpoint, right? So what are some things that you might do? Yes, I love this. It's dependent on another feature. I think that's really key. Resources, time, cost. I love these answers, right? Time, cost, resources are all good, right? I think they're great. I also think that it's important to add in others' POV. A lot of times us as product managers, we're like, it's that we don't have resources, it's costly. And we're like, blah, blah, blah. You always say that, right? But what if you come in with the technology team saying, here's a bunch of other things that we're working on right now. So if we did this, that's great, but there's a consequence, right? What are the cons of adding something in that affects other parts, right? And I think that's really important because then it's not about you. It's not you just saying we can't do it because we ain't got the money and we ain't got the resources. We're actually saying, no, we actually have a laundry list of things happening. If we add this thing in, while it's so important, right, there's a few other things that will be compromised. And that's that art of negotiation and thinking things through. So let's move on because I think you guys kind of got this point. Now we're moving ahead. Third lesson, saying no. We just talked about it, right? So saying no is unfortunately a part of our job, right? We are going to have to say no often. We're going to have to say no to some of these stakeholders. We might have to say no to clients. How do you say no without saying the word no, right? And I think that's where it gets really difficult. First thing is be real with yourself. If I go back to my 3 to 4 leg chair, if a chair is not going to be able to stand with 3 legs, we have to be honest and tell that. And this is where I really get into defending the technology team. So it's important for you to recite back to customers that why something is not going to happen or why it's not practical, right? Offer alternatives. There is a lot of times stakeholders think they want something, but when you offer them other things, they're like, oh yeah, I actually like that better, right? So it's important to think through alternatives as you kind of go back. Don't dismiss customers, right? That's the worst thing you can do. A lot of people vent because they just want to be heard. So it's important to let people feel like they are, letting loose about what some of their opinions are, but don't also ask for approval, right? In the end of the day, and this is where you're walking that fine line, it's really on you as the product manager to help make those decisions. So you can't be asking for approval, but you also have to say no in a way where you're not saying the word no. Some ideas. Make sure they feel heard. You guys know that, right? Explain why it's not a fit now. So something might be a great idea, but it's just the timing is off, right? The timing is off because our 5 engineers are mobile engineers, and that's a great web feature, and they don't know how to do that yet, right? So I have it, I'm on it. It's just that it's not a fit right now. If you're ever in a scenario where you want to do something, you don't want to do something, or you do want to do something and the stakeholder doesn't or does, and you're just at a conflict, go validate it. In the end of the day, right? It doesn't matter what I think. It doesn't matter what the head of marketing thinks. It matters what the customer thinks, right? So let's validate. And you might come back and say, oh my God, this feature is so important because people actually want to use it. Let's bump it up, right? Or you might come back with ammunition to tell the marketing head of marketing, this is why it's not important. I did some extra validation, but maybe we can think of it this way. Out of the validation came an improvise or an iterative idea from it. And again, offer alternatives, right? So let's try this exercise at home. Feel free to email me some of your ideas, but imagine you are the PM at this awesome, awesome startup and your founder wants you to build a mobile app. Cool. She is obsessed with mobile apps. She thinks that's like the best way to do things. She says, build a mobile app. It's got to be a mobile app. You do some initial research and everything points to that you should actually build a web first approach, not a mobile first, right? If you even talk to some initial users, and it doesn't even matter what the product is, guys, this is just a simple exercise for you to kind of think through how do you say no. Initial users you even talked to said they prefer web. So your research shows a website's better, or initial users says, I'm not gonna use a mobile app for this, I'm gonna use a website. Even tech validated for you that if we went with the website, it'll be much faster to implement. But your stubborn founder boss wants you to do a mobile app, right? You're at this fork in the road. I want you to think through, first of all, which way would you go? And I do a lot of these exercises in my book as well. There's no right or wrong answer, right? But the point is, which way would you choose? Why did you choose that way? How would you articulate to the, and most importantly, what would you tell to the people that you didn't choose their way, right? So if you decide to go with the founder and build mobile app, great. What are you going to tell everybody else? If you decide to go with the team and your research, great. What are you going to tell your boss, right? I want you to just think that through and practice it. Again, no right or wrong answers, but more importantly, it'll get your brain to thinking, because in the end of the day, we're always going to be in forks in the road. We're always going to be making, and I made this an easy exercise, but it could be like different ways to go, right? How do we choose what we choose? What's our thought process? And most importantly, how do we articulate to the people that we didn't choose? Cool exercise, try it at home. Now let's try this practical in our use case, right? In our biking app. I've circled 3 features here, okay? We have decided based off research, based off tech, whatever, right? That we are going to pick these 3 circled features as our first iteration. Tech came to us and said, we can only do 3 things, right? Let's assume they're all the same weight and t-shirt size to do, but we can only do 3 given resources. You guys pick these 3 features, right? We're gonna have the mobile app locate a bike. We're gonna have some pricing and filtering on the types of bikes that are available, and we're gonna have ability to pay for the bike, right? We're not gonna do the native language. It's all gonna be English, right? We're not gonna do, so people that come in that are from foreign languages might not understand the app. We're not gonna suggest where to park the bike, and we're not gonna do any community social sharing. Oh my God, you have to now tell the CMO, the CEO, and the growth person we're not doing their beloved feature, right? I'm gonna start with the CMO. She is all about marketing and engagement, right? And she is now saying, that sucks. You don't think that it makes sense for this mobile app to have their native language. So you can select French, you can select English, you can select Hindi, right? Why doesn't that make the top list? What are you going to tell the CMO, right? Shoot something out in the Zoom, just some ideas. How are you going to approach this conversation? Reminder, you're probably going to have to work with the CMO and the marketing team going forward too, right? You don't want to piss them off, but how are you going to articulate that your feature wasn't chosen in this first iteration and these other 3 were? Okay, maybe your research came back that most of our tourists speak English or whatever language you chose. We are going to, sorry, I'm just typing fast, so mind the spelling errors. I love this one, can get to 50% of market quickly. We can get users, right? That's what marketing people want. They want engagement. Like, let's get people on it first, right? Because we can get 50%, 30%, 20%. We can get people going and on the system path faster. Tell the CMO I'm applying for unemployment. But what are some, these are great ideas to kind of start thinking through. Let's move to the CEO. This is really hard, right? Because it's the boss's boss's boss, right? We are now going to tell the CEO that, oops, I actually had this. Oh, no, I have it. Park bike suggestion on where to park the bike, right? So this is the ability to say, I want you to suggest to people where to park the bike, like park it in front of Walmart. Because there's a lot of people under Walmart right now, right? What are you going to tell the CEO, right, on why his or her feature didn't make the top list? So user adoption is something I think of. Liability, okay? So I think that's one. You know, in anything, security scares people, right? So I think it's important that we need to talk about liability and security. That's always a very soft way to get things done, right? I'll share a quick story with you. I was building a billing system for a finance company once, and everybody wanted to pay with credit card, credit card, credit card, credit card, because right now it's just paying with check. And we decided to actually build with bank accounts, ACH. And you know, everyone was happy because we built amazing features over time, but they said, why didn't you choose credit card? It's not secure, right? Credit card fraud. And they're like, oh yeah. So reminding people of some of the vulnerabilities and securities with certain things might be good too. Resources, all that, I think you guys are getting the point. I'm going to skip the growth because I think you guys get it right now. The point is, how do we subtly get back to any user to kind of think through shift, right? Shift the thinking. Fourth lesson, this is my favorite, and you can see that I take a lot of pride in it. Storytelling, storytelling, storytelling. A big part of your roadmap is telling the story, right? I usually know within 5 minutes if I'm going to hire someone or recommend someone for the next round of an interview or not. I ask them the first question, what's your story, right? If you can't tell me your story about you, your career, your adventures, then how the heck are you going to tell a story about a product, right? So get in that mindset. And a lot of people, this doesn't come easy, right? Because we might be introverts, but practice becoming amazing storytellers. It's just going to get you so much further in your career and in your product. You know, when it pertains to roadmaps specifically, communicate often, right? Remind people, you know, remind your delivery teams what the goals are in the in your delivery teams and your pod teams. It's all about what are we doing tomorrow, right? And I think that's fine. You obviously need to, and naturally all of those meetings end up becoming like that. But I think it's also important to kind of reflect about where things are going. I actually every Friday have another no agenda meeting with my team. I usually reserve it just for the delivery team, the engineers and the product managers. And we don't talk shop. We don't talk about what we're working on, but we talk about great customer feedback we got, a reminder of our vision of what we want to do in 6 months, right? It's a great moment for that delivery team to realize, oh yeah, there's that end goal of what we're shooting towards. And here's real customers and what they're saying. We even celebrate wins, right? We celebrate the launch of a feature. We clap for everybody. So these are those moments where you have to really take that to your delivery team and make it something that, you know, tell that story to empower them and inspire them. When it comes to stakeholders, if something goes wrong, don't hide it. I sound the alarm immediately, right? I would go to the marketing team or the CEO and say, listen, life happened, right? An engineer has to go away for a month, or this happened. I'm sorry, but a reminder, this was a guide, right? This was not set in stone. So if things are going to change, alarm that, sound that alarm quickly, right? And build that story around it. You know, a quick tip I'll tell you is I love going taking roadmaps and making a show out of them, right? Presentations are boring, right? I mean, it's hard over virtual, and I'm trying to make this less of a presentation, but putting on a show is much more impactful, right? That's why we love Broadway shows. That's why we love movies, right? So I failed once because I used to do a town hall, and we had every month we had to have a town hall. We'd have 30 minutes from the product team. And the first one when I joined that company is we did a presentation. People were looking at their cell phones. They were disengaged. It was a failure, right? And I realized quickly, we got to put on a show. We got to make these people like engaged. Our next town hall, there's a picture of my team actually doing this live. We had sticky notes and whiteboards all over the place. We dropped the presentation and we only had a few slides with a lot of images. We started telling our story, right? Apple does a great job at this. If you ever watch Apple's launches, there's not boring presentations. They're people talking and demoing and showing, right? So we quickly changed our roadmap into not a bullets and slides, but we changed it into a show. And it was the best compliment I ever got. Someone actually came up to me and said, your team just put on an amazing, amazing show, right? So how do you transform your presentation into a story or a show? Someone's asking, can you explain to me what a show is? A show is, you know, where you're actually doing what I'm doing. You're not reading the bullet points, right? You're not coming up with just a presentation, but you're building your own stories around it. I do a whole talk on this, but already I've talked about my wife, my son, right? Adding personal, adding humor, getting getting your audience involved, right? It's hard to do it, but in a live room, I would have people get up and demo. I'd have people share, make fun of your product. Do you know Apple does a great job? If you ever saw the Apple phone version 1 or 2, they still mock it at times and say, this is where we started, right? It's okay to add humor, personality, make it real, make it authentic, right? And put on a show. That's what I mean by it. I hope that helps. Okay, some tips here. That was a great segue. I didn't even know I had this slide. Use image, spark emotion, right? I do a whole other talk on EQ. Product managers are wired to be so like analytical, but our EQ is really what makes us from good to awesome, right? So spark people's emotion. 98% of what we buy day in and day out is based off emotion, right? I'll buy something on Amazon because my buddy did. I'm like, oh my God, I want it. And they're like, I loved it, right? So how do you spark emotion when you're talking about your roadmap or your presentation? Get creative, interactive. I'm trying to be as interactive as I can right now with you guys, but when you're live, get creative. How are you going to get them involved, right? How are you going to make it more of always be a constant room reader. I'm looking at the chat constantly, right? Because I do this a lot, but become a room reader. If someone starts getting disengaged, you have to switch something. I'll give you a great example. I remember when I used to present, always the operations team would get like disengaged. They would get on their phone because it was all about the experience and great stuff we started building, right? And for them, it was like boring. It was a snoozer. I realized quickly that I'm disembanning them. So I started bringing up things they would get excited about. And I said, you know what? We're getting about 850 calls in our call center about this. So we have some ideas. Immediately their phones would go down. They're like, did someone just say we had 850 calls coming into the ops desk? Right? So how do you kind of become a great room reader over time as well? The other one, it's not on this list, but it's a great tip that I'll share with you guys. And I do it quite a bit now is, it's called the predict the noise tactic. I made up the term, predict the noise. Before I walk into any meeting, guys, or any presentation, right, I'll know who's coming in. It's the CMO, it's the CFO, etc. And I try to predict all of the things that they're going to say that are going to derail my meeting, right? Are they going to talk about something that's what are they upset about? What's potentially something they can get? And now I used to do it on a piece of paper. Now I just do it in my head because I've done it so often, but try this before you walk into your next meeting and you're going to present something. And you usually know who some of the noisier people are, right? Predict some of the things that they might say. And it's best to even have your answer ready, right? How many times have you or someone you've known been in a meeting and they stumble because someone said something, they're like, oh, I don't know, right? But if you predict some of this beforehand, you actually are training yourself to become A, confident, B, say no, in a nice way, and also become an amazing storyteller because you're engaging people in conversation. So there's a bunch of just random tips that I threw out there, but hopefully some of them will resonate. All right, I know we're up to 15 minutes. Prioritize like a boss, right? Scope creep is a killer. It's always gonna happen, right? And there's millions of product models out there, right? Like I like this model, I like that model. I personally am not married to any model. Whatever model works for you, all the power to you. Just make sure everyone understands it, right? Because a lot of times people pick a model, but then their tech team and product teams working in a model, and then they realize their stakeholders have no idea. They thought they were working in a different model. So whatever it is, just make sure people understand it and it's consistent. Second point here, geek to speak. Our job is translating geek to speak. We sit between the technology team and the user teams, right? So it's important that we don't say Kanban and this and that. We need to speak a language and defend our technology team. When they say, what is the prioritization model, right? You're not gonna get unless you have very technically savvy stakeholders, you're not going to get them into a Jira board, right? You have to make sure that you're translating. This goes back to the first point on storytelling. So make sure that things are clear and they understand why things are happening now versus later. And if you want a new feature, how does it work in your prioritization model? I'll quickly share my model, right? Again, take it with a grain of salt. This is just what I've used over the years. And any model that you might be using, this form is already probably a part of it. But my model is really simple, right? And it's first few iterations of anything you build has to be the groundwork. Let's imagine we're building houses. We can have the best house in the world, 10-foot ceilings, painted, interior decorated, big windows, right? But if the plumbing doesn't work, then what's the point, right? So my model is about 90% of your first few iterations should be focused on laying the groundwork, laying the foundation. You have 10% wiggle to start doing research on the next tier, which is the user, but really just build something that has a solid foundation. Then you can quickly shift into, in our house example, now you can start talking to the user. Do you want 4 bathrooms? Do you want 3 bedrooms? How many kids do you have? Do you like tall windows, small windows? You can start building that user experience, right? Then you quickly shift to community growth, right? What does the next house look like? Are we going to have block parties? What does the neighborhood look like, right? And I think there has to be, and for me, a lot of the models that you probably use underlying already have this component. I'm going back to the iPhone, but it's such an amazing story of this model. The first few versions of the iPhone were basically geared at getting call and SMS together in a small square box, right? Rectangle box. Then came apps and swipes and push button and all that, the user experience, and finally came the App Store, right? Community growth and social and all that. So, you know, as you think through what model it doesn't matter what you choose. In the end of the day, think in that mindset, right? You can't build a fancy car if the engine doesn't work, right? So there is kind of that, a little bit of that sequential as you think about building things in parallel. So let's go to our final exercise. Prioritize. Okay, we have our 6 features. We have our 6 people, right? You can only pick 2 things. For whatever reason, it doesn't matter right now. You can only pick 2 things out of these 6 features, right? Remember, we're in Italy. We're building this mobile app for people and tourists to rent bikes, right? And you, for your first MVP, you can only pick 2 things. I'd love to hear on the chat which 2 features you would pick. And maybe even a short description in a few words on why you chose those 2 features, right? And let's assume you've done insight, you've talked to everybody, right? And you're just forced. You're forced to prioritize 2 of these 6 features. Reminder, the features are native language in the app, locate your bike, pricing and viewing the types of bikes, unlock and payment, park, and social share. I'm already getting some is 3 and 4. Locate and pay, locate and pay. Okay, got 2 for locate and pay, locate and pay, locate and park, locate and pay. Okay, I think you guys have gotten the point here, right? Out of everything we talked about today, it's not going to be a great app even if the first version, if we can't pay for it, right? We are trying to unlock bikes and pay for it, and we need to know the inventory, right? So you know, again, no wrong or right answers for this exercise. If you're asking me, I would have picked 3 and 4 too. And I would have given those hard messages to the other people. I would have had some insight on why I picked 3 and 4. I would have made sure that I have great talking points and data, as well as customer feedback on why I picked 3 and 4 as I go back to 1, 2, 5, and 6 on why I didn't pick theirs. So cool. And by the way, it goes back to my model, right? You got to lay the groundwork first before you can start building all that in. So listen, this stuff is not easy, right? You know, these are some of these features that we talked about today, and this is why I wrote the book. I go into a lot more detail on other things in the book. For example, I go into negotiating and, you know, pushing back when data lies to you. But these are the things that you can't just go to any school or course online that's product oriented and learn this, right? These are those subtle things you learn from failing when you're out there. And that's why I'm sharing them with you, because I failed at a lot of these. A few quick, just random tips that I would give to any of you guys is, you know, make friends at work, but remember, you know, it's almost your role as a product manager to stay neutral. Don't ever be biased one way or the other, because your job is going to be neutral at times. Never get married to your product. I've done this a lot. Most of the time, you're not building for yourself. You're building for someone else, right? So make sure that you're not getting married to your product and you're thinking it through. One other one in line with this, I just did a talk on millennials and Gen Z. Every client matters, right? So different clients, whether it's age, demographic, location, East and West Coast, make sure you're getting diverse feedback as you're building your products, because it's not just about one group, right? And thinking it through, and focus on these things, right? Because it's not just about getting things done. It's also about kind of navigating the org. 2 coffee chats a day. I could drink a lot of coffee, as you can see, you know, but it doesn't have to be coffee. Every day, I've been doing this for almost 10 years. I allot 2 15-minute parts in my calendar, one in the morning, one in the afternoon. And those 15 minutes are just to talk to someone that I never really talk to, right? It could be at work, it could be outside of work. At work, it's usually someone on the marketing team or the ops team, and just someone I haven't spent time with. And I ask them simple questions. The question is, what is my team doing well? What do you like about the product? What sucks about the product? What are some of your struggles? How can I help, right? And, you know, it's a very simple tactic in a meeting, but what happens inherently and you don't realize is you're building a rapport with these people, right? And you start doing it more and more and more. And this aura starts forming of that you're there for them, right? And you're getting feedback and you're also scratching their back when they need it. Have workshops. I told you this millions of times already. Workshops are the bomb, right? Workshops are what really changes anything and turns meetings into excitement, and balance data with actually watching people work. Final thoughts here. Just my personal quote: you can't build great products if you don't build a great you first, right? I mean, the whole story here is, you know, I'll share a quick story. The best product manager I ever had on my team that worked for me, she was the office assistant, right? But you know, she was amazing. She was like, going around getting everyone's feedback. She was asking how the office is, right? Any feedback to improve it. When people asked her to do things that were not in her scope, like go print something, she's like, no, I don't do that. She said no in a great way. She would put out surveys to get feedback. She would push back. She had all of the skills that we talked about today. And I'm like, you should be on my team as a product manager. She's like, I know nothing about product. I'm like, try it. She quickly learned product. And I'm proud to say she runs product at Betterment now, right? And that story is like first, and we were having coffee the other day and I'm like, I'm so proud of everything you've done. It's like, you're amazing. She's like, yeah, but I built, you saw in me those skills that were about me, right? And you know, that's why I've always written this book and I've always thought these skills are so important. You can't build awesome stuff if you don't build an awesome you. So remember to focus on all of the skills we talked about. I think I have 5 minutes for questions, Anjali, but I'm Vivek Bedi again. That's my website. That's my email. I'm always available if you have any questions and you need help in any which way.
This is awesome. So part of my role in kicking off and hosting this event was to take notes. And I struggled with getting so caught up in the show and the story and the lessons that I had to remind myself, oh, wait a minute, go back and take some notes. We have to share this after. So I truly enjoyed that. I'm taking a look at the questions that are open right now in Slido. I think you covered most of them. It looks like a couple are coming in right now, so we can take a minute for that. We've got a couple more minutes before we need to wrap.
Sure. I see a bunch in Zoom, and I'm sorry if I didn't get to all your questions, but email me or find me on LinkedIn. Can I just answer one, Anjali, because I'm so passionate about it? Do you think the founder is the custodian of a project? You know, I guide a lot of startups today, and the first hire I tell them to hire is a product manager. A lot of people actually try to hire an engineer first to build it. Your product manager in an early stage is so important, because a lot of founders make this crucial mistake of trying to act like a product manager. Those are very different roles. A founder is supposed to give the ideas and really kind of give their thought, but it's really important to have a product manager, because it goes back to my point of not getting married to your product. When I founded my company, my first hire was a product manager, because I said, I am too married to this. I need someone who can give me honest opinions too, right? So I think the founder is obviously one of the most important people in a product, but it's important to separate yourself from, you know, the emotion of the product and the company. And a founder has a lot of other things to do, right? And if you're doing all these other things, you're not doing product well, right? Because a product manager is a full-time job. So that's my short answer to that. I'm just really passionate about that question, so I jumped in, Anjali, sorry.
Oh, good. Another question came in through the chat of how can you keep emotional excitement if your product is more exciting when you touch and feel it versus just pictures?
Yeah, I think I'm just trying to dissect this question, but I think that black and whites are cool, but demos are important as well. So, try to find that right balance, right? A good story or a good show, and I can send you guys another deck, has conflict, has a setup, has heroes and villains, right? So it doesn't matter that you just have beautiful pictures on Canva like I did here, right? It's also important to demo your product, have people touch and feel it, as you said, or see it, or even like break it, as funny as that sounds, right? Sometimes adding in humor that, or showing first versions of your product on how it started. Facebook does a great job of this. If you ever watch some Facebook tracks, they'll show their first version of, and I'm going to date myself here, Anjali, with MySpace and things like that, and how things used to look like, geez, versus what they look like now. But they don't sweep that under the rug. They talk about it, right? Because it adds and engages your audience. So I hope I answered the question, but it's not just about pictures and visuals. It's about demos. It's about humor. It's about a lot of things. It's about introducing conflict. The reason we like and listen to stuff is because there's conflict. Humans love problems, right? So introduce conflicts. The conflict could be something that's missing in the market, right? Or an issue or an angry customer that you had, and share how their story and how you turned it around. So introduce that in your stories as well.